My mom forgot my birthday this year. Not forgot. She just didn't acknowledge it. No text, no call, nothing. I turned 31 on a Tuesday, and they spent the evening eating leftover pasta alone in my apartment, watching my phone not ring. That part I'd gotten used to. What I hadn't gotten used to was what happened 3 weeks later, when my dad called me in a panic because he'd seen my new condo listed on Zillow. Let me back up. I grew up the older of 2 kids in a pretty normal-looking household outside of Columbus, Ohio. I say normal-looking because from the outside, everything seemed fine. My parents worked, we had a house, we took vacations. But inside that house, there was a very clear hierarchy, and I was not at the top of it. My brother, he's 4 years younger than me, was the one who needed protecting. He was sensitive, he was creative, he had a lot of potential that just needed the right environment to bloom. That's a direct quote from my mother, by the way. Sat at the dinner table when I was 16 and he was 12, and I'd just gotten a B- on a chemistry test while he'd failed the entire semester. She said it while rubbing his back. I learned early that my job in that family was to be invisible and self-sufficient. Don't ask for help. Don't make noise. Don't need anything. My brother got the noise. He got the help. He got the right environment. I got pretty good at being self-sufficient. By the time I was in high school, I was working part-time at a bakery on weekends, saving everything I made. I had this idea, probably too formed for a 17-year-old, but I'd been planning since I was 15 that I was going to go to college, study something practical, and get out. I had a specific number I was working toward. I knew exactly what in-state tuition cost, what room and board cost, what I needed to cover the gap that financial aid wouldn't. I did the math. I saved the money. I was, in my mind, completely prepared. Junior year, my dad sat me down and said they'd been talking, and they thought it would be better for our family if I considered the community college route for the first 2 years, then transferred. They'd help cover it. They were framing it as a gift, like they were doing me a favor. I asked what happened to the college fund. He got very quiet. My grandmother, my dad's mother, had set up small funds for both of us when we were born. Not huge, but enough to matter, enough to make a difference. I'd known about it vaguely, but it was always framed as something far away and not yet real. Turns out it had become real a couple of years earlier, when my brother decided he wanted to move to Nashville and pursue music seriously. He was 16. My parents had decided his dream was urgent enough to access those funds early. Both of them. Mine included. My dad didn't say it directly. He talked around it for a long time before I understood what he was actually telling me. And when I understood, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I went very still in a way that I now recognize as the way my body processes something too large to feel all at once. I said, "Okay," and I went to my room. I want to be honest about that moment because it shaped everything that came after. I didn't fight it. I didn't demand it back. I was 17 and I didn't know I could. I didn't know what legal recourse looked like or that there even was any. I just absorbed it, the way I'd absorbed everything in that family. And I went back to my spreadsheet and recalculated. I went to the community college. I worked more hours at the bakery. I transferred after 2 years, like the plan. I graduated in 4 years total with less debt than most people I knew because I'd been scrimping and calculating and refusing to let myself need anything from anyone. My brother, meanwhile, did not make it in Nashville. He moved back home at 22. Then he tried real estate. Then he tried drop shipping. Then he tried to become a fitness influencer. None of it went anywhere. My parents kept him going. Rent, groceries, a car payment for a while. Every time he pivoted, they pivoted their support with him. I'm not saying I wanted them to cut him off, but I would be lying if I said watching it didn't leave a mark. After I graduated, I went into UX design. I'm good at it. Not in a braggy way, just in a way that meant I got promoted faster than I expected, then got recruited away, then got recruited again. By 27, I was a senior designer at a product company in Austin. By 29, I was leading a small team. I lived carefully, invested consistently, didn't inflate my lifestyle every time my salary went up. My social media presence was minimal. I don't post much. I'm private about money in particular, partly personality, partly because of what happened with my family, partly because I'd learned that having things people don't know about gives you a kind of protection. What I did do about 8 months ago is buy a condo. It's in a nice part of Austin. It's not ostentatious. It's a one-bedroom in a building with a good HOA, good bones, near the trail I run every morning. But the price was significant. I paid cash, which I know sounds insane, but it made sense for my situation. I'd been putting money away for years. I'd hit a number that felt right, and I didn't want the monthly pressure of a mortgage. I wanted one less thing to carry. The real estate agent uploaded the listing after the sale was processed. It was just paperwork, standard stuff. But the address was public record, and at some point a Zillow alert connected to my name, and somehow my mother saw it. I didn't know any of this had happened. I found out on a Thursday evening when my dad called me. He never calls. He texts occasionally, short ones, logistical, but calling is unusual. I picked up because unusual worried me. He didn't ask how I was. He said, "I saw the property." I said, "What property?" He said, "Your place in Austin. The condo." He had the address ready. That's a significant purchase, Olivia. I want to pause here for 1 second, because I need you to understand the tone. It wasn't proud. It wasn't congratulatory. It was the tone of a man who has just encountered something that complicates a narrative he'd been holding for a long time, and he was trying to recalibrate. He said, "Your mother and I have been talking. We think it would be good for all of us to sit down together. There are some things that have come up that we should discuss as a family. I'm thinking this weekend we could do Saturday." I said Saturday didn't work. He said, "This is important, Olivia. We're asking all three of you." I said, "Who is the third person?" He said, "My brother." And I want to tell you, I knew right then exactly what the meeting was about. Not the condo, not catching up, not some genuine desire to reconnect. They'd seen my purchase price, they'd run some math in their heads, and now they wanted to have a conversation. About family, about support, about how we all look out for each other. I almost said no, I almost said I had plans, I was busy, I couldn't make the drive from Austin to Columbus on short notice, which was all technically true, but there was something in me, maybe the 17-year-old who went still at the dinner table, who wanted to walk into that room, who wanted to sit in that chair and look at them and say the things I'd been carrying since I was a junior in high school, who'd just found out her future had been quietly redirected without her consent. So I said, fine. I'd come Saturday. I drove up. 11 hours, one overnight stop in Memphis. I did not tell them I was driving. They assumed I flew. I let them assume. My brother was already there when I arrived. He hugged me the way he always does, a little performative, a little like he's trying to establish that things are warm between us before anything awkward can happen. He looked tired. He'd recently pivoted, I knew, into some kind of content creation around personal finance, which I had feelings about that I kept to myself. My mother made coffee. She was pleasant in the surface way she gets when she's managing an agenda. She asked about Austin, about my work, about whether I was seeing anyone. I answered lightly. When we sat down in the living room, my dad led. He said they were glad we were all together. He said he knew we hadn't been in the same room in a while, almost 2 years, which was true, and that it was good to fix that. He said there were some things they wanted to talk about openly, as a family, because they believed in communication. He said, "We've been doing some thinking about the future, and we want to make sure we're being fair to everyone." I waited. He said my brother was going through a transition period. He said the content work was promising but hadn't monetized yet. He said they were helping where they could, but it was putting some strain on things. He said they wanted to think about how the family could work together to support each other. He looked at me. I looked back at him. He said, "You've clearly done very well for yourself, Olivia. We're proud of you." He said it quickly, like he needed to get it out of the way. "And we were wondering if you'd be open to a conversation about a loan, to your brother, something that would help him get stable while things pick up." There was a beat of silence. I said, I want to ask you something first. He said, of course. I said, when I was 17, what happened to my college fund? The room changed. My mother set down her coffee cup. My brother's eyes went to the window. My dad said, Olivia, I said. I'm not yelling. I'm asking. I want to know how you'd characterize what happened. Because I was 17 and I didn't have the language for it then, and I'd like to hear you say it out loud now. He started to explain. He used words like family priority and temporary decision, and we thought it was the right call at the time. My mother said they hadn't realized how it would affect me. My brother was quiet, which told me he'd known, for at least some of this, what had been done. I let them finish. Then I said, you took money that was put aside specifically for me by my grandmother to fund something for him without asking me, without telling me until you had to, and now, in this room, you're asking me to give him more. I said it without raising my voice. I was calm in a way that surprised me. Actually, I'd expected more feeling, and instead there was just clarity. My dad said, we understand this is complicated. I said, I need you to understand something. I said that everything I have, I built without help. The community college, the transfer, the jobs, the savings, the condo. None of that came from a fund or a loan or a call from you asking how you could support me. I made all of it out of what was left after you made a decision about my future, without my knowledge. I said, I don't have any bitterness about my brother. I said that directly because it was true and I didn't want it to become about him. I said, I genuinely hope his work takes off, but I am not a resource for this family to draw on. I was never consulted about being that resource, and I am declining now, clearly and directly, so there's no confusion. My mother said my name in a way that was meant to soften things. I said, I love you. I said it to both of them because it was also true. I said, I am not here to punish anyone, but I've been waiting a long time to say this in a room with all of you, and I needed to say it. My brother finally said, I didn't know they'd used yours too. I thought it was just my own. I looked at him. He seemed genuinely uncomfortable, which was something. I said, okay, not I forgive you, not it's fine. Just, okay. I heard you. We stayed for lunch. It was quiet and a little strange, and my mother overcompensated with food the way she does when she doesn't know how to handle a conversation that's gone somewhere real. My dad didn't bring up the loan again. Nobody did. When I left, he walked me to my car. He stood there for a moment and said, I am proud of you, Olivia. I want you to know that. I said, thank you. He said, I'm sorry we didn't say it more. I drove back to Memphis that night and stayed at the same hotel I'd stopped at on the way up. I sat in the parking lot for a while before going in, not crying exactly, but something adjacent to it. The kind of feeling that's not sadness and not satisfaction, but somewhere in between, like a door you've been pushing against for years has finally opened, and now you're just standing in the frame, adjusting to the light. I don't know what happens with my family from here. I don't know if my brother figures it out or if my parents stop looking at me as a solution to problems they created. I genuinely hope things get better for all of them. What I know is that I drove back to Austin on Sunday, walked into my condo, stood in my kitchen in the late afternoon light, and felt, for the first time in a long time, like everything in that space was just mine. Not explained, not defended, not justified to anyone. Just mine. If you've ever felt like the invisible one, the one who was expected to manage while someone else was managed, you know what that kitchen moment feels like? And if you're still working toward it, I want you to know the math works. Keep going. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one. I've thought a lot about that Saturday. Not the meeting itself, but the drive back. 11 hours down, one night in Memphis, 11 hours home. Somewhere on I-40 West, with the sun low and the highway mostly empty, I kept turning one question over in my head. Why did I go? Not in a regretful way. I'm glad I went, but I needed to understand my own reasons, because for a long time I'd told myself the story that I was fine, that I'd moved on, that what happened with my college fund was just a thing that happened, and I'd handled it, and I was okay. And clearly, some part of me was not okay, or I wouldn't have driven 11 hours to sit in my parents' living room and say the things I said. Here's what I've come to. When you spend years absorbing things in silence, the silence doesn't make them go away. It just stores them. And at some point, the storage fills up, and whatever was in there has to go somewhere. I think that's what that meeting was for me. Not revenge, not confrontation for its own sake. Just finally releasing something I'd been carrying since I was 17 years old and sitting very still at a dining room table. My brother said he didn't know they'd used my fund too. I believe him, and I think that matters. Not because it changes what happened, but because it means the person I was most quietly angry at wasn't him. It was a story I'd been telling myself about being alone in it. That story was half true and half something I'd built to protect myself from having to ask for anything. What I know about cause and effect in real life is that it's rarely as clean as we want it to be. My parents made a decision when I was 17, and that decision sent me down a particular road, harder, quieter, more self-contained. But that road also made me someone who knew how to save money and live beneath her means and build something out of very little. I'm not grateful for the choice they made, but I can see, honestly, that the person who bought that condo in cash was shaped, partly, by having to figure everything out alone. That's not a justification, it's just what's true. The thing I keep coming back to, the thing I'd want anyone to hear who sees something of themselves in this story, is that being self-sufficient is not the same as being okay. I was extremely self-sufficient for a very long time, and for most of that time I told myself that meant I was fine. It doesn't. Being okay means knowing what you needed, naming what was taken, and saying so. Out loud, in a room, to the people involved. Even when it's 11 years late and nothing can be given back. Integrity is what you do with the truth once you've let yourself see it clearly. Not what you do for applause, not what you do because it serves you, but what you do because it's honest and because you owe it to yourself to stop pretending otherwise. I drove home on Sunday. I walked into my condo. I stood in my kitchen and I felt finally like I wasn't carrying anything extra, just the weight of my own life, which is exactly enough.